Morning. About 8 years ago, I lived down in Alabama for a few years. And while I was down there, I rented a small home, and my neighbors next to me were a couple by the name of Steve and Susan Thomas. No, it was not the Steve Thomas that was the former pastor here. Different Thomases. And if there were holidays that I could not make it back up here to Pennsylvania, they would kindly invite me over to share a holiday meal with me. And one Easter, they invited me over, and I had Easter dinner with them. And after the meal, Steve went into the living room and sat down in his recliner. And he was a smoker, so he lit up a cigarette and got his ashtray out. And he turned on a John Wayne Western and proceeded to watch it. And I followed Susan into the kitchen where she began to clean up. Okay? And while we were sitting in the kitchen talking, we sort of talked about all the things you talk about with someone that you don't really know. Like, what do you do? Where are you from? How did you get here? All those sort of questions. And eventually I got around to asking her about her and Steve. I said, well, how long have you guys been married? And she said, 41 years. And I responded with one of those like normal responses you give to somebody when you hear about their anniversary or how long they've been married for. I was like, oh, I'm sure it's been wonderful and you've gained a lot in 41 years of marriage. And she paused and she rolled her eyes. And then she glanced past me into the living room. And then she rolled her eyes again and she said, oh yeah, I've gained a lot. She said, just turn around and look what I've gotten to show for 41 years of marriage. And I turned around, and there in the living room was Steve with his belt undone, his head back, his mouth wide open, just snoring away, a lit cigarette just dangling from his fingers. And she's like, that's what you get after 41 years of marriage. She said, just look at him, just snoring away. 41 years of this. And I turned back to Susan. I could tell she was very angry because she had the pan that she had baked the ham in, and she was furiously scrubbing it, okay? And pieces of ham were flying off of it like shrapnel from a grenade, all right? And she said, let me tell you. She said, because I know you're not married. And she said, when I got married on my wedding day, they told me never go to bed angry. She said, after 41 years, I wake up angry with him. She said, I look over, and there he is just breathing. She said, is that true love? When you get angry at somebody, just looking at him breathing up and down, right? And she said, all I can think about when I'm looking at is all the things he needs to get done for me, all the things he has yet to get done, and all the things he said he would get done and never does. I said, well, what does Steve say when he wakes up? She said, oh, he's always polite. He turns over and goes, good morning, honey. And she says, it takes everything in my soul not to be like, what is so good about it? I'm lying next to you right now, and the garage door has been broken for 8 months. I was stunned, and I looked back because I had never heard this from somebody, this honest appraisal of their marriage after 41 years. I said, Susan, I'm getting some mixed signals here. I said, do you want to tell me, like, do you love him or do you hate him? And she paused from scrubbing the pan, and she looked at me and she said, well, if I'm being honest, after 41 years, I certainly hate him more. She said, but, and that's when her tone changed. And she looked into the living room, and I could tell she was looking at him with the eyes, how she had looked at him when she first met him, how she had looked at him when she first fell in love with him, how she had looked at him on her wedding day. And she said, but I will never love him any less. I will never love him any less. Love. That's the topic of today's gospel. And what a concept, what an idea, right? Love. And this isn't an overstatement. The ability to utilize love, and I want you to think of it like a tool, the ability to utilize love in our relationships, it'll make us or break us. And I don't want you just to think in terms of spousal relationships, because that's what we all think about when we're thinking about love. Think about it in every relationship you have on this earth, every human relationship, right? Whether it's with coworkers, friends, neighbors, family, kids, parents, right? Your employer, your boss, maybe your employees, everybody. It'll make you or break you when it comes to maintaining and keeping relationships with people or building relationships. It really will. It all comes down to this concept of love. It even applies to your relationship with your pets, all right, your dog or your cat or even your goldfish, all right? Any relationship you have going on, it all comes down to your ability to utilize love in that relationship. All right, now what's interesting, here's this vitally important concept, this vitally important tool, this concept what we call love. And the reality is, and I am guilty of this too, we all sort of have what I call an 8th grade understanding of love. All right, we all think of, when somebody says love, what we always think of is that sort of concept we had about love when we were back in high school, right? When we looked and said, oh, I really like him or her. Oh, they're going to be my soulmate. Oh, we're going to live the rest of life together, and it'll just be wonderful because I like them so much, right? We tend to do that as humans. That's how we look at love a lot of times. Even our dictionary definition of love, it barely scratches the surface of how deep this concept of. The dictionary definition says, just like Michael kind of described for us, it's a deep affection for something, right? That means affection by meaning a deep liking of something. That's it. You know, the ancient Greeks had 5 different words to describe love. In English, all we can say is we have a deep liking for something. Guys, it goes way beyond that. What Jesus is talking about in this gospel, it's a love that's far deeper than just a deep liking of something, right? So how can we break free of this sort of what I call this 8th grade understanding of love and utilize this correctly in our relationships, all of our relationships? I want you to think about relationships right now, any that you have, okay? Remember, this is every relationship in your life. And I want you to ask yourself, what is the glue that holds that relationship together through everything? I mean the glue. Okay, now everybody's going to say, well, love. Yeah, but what is love, right? That's the problem. We're trying to define it here. What is the consistency of that glue? Guys, it's the big T word, toleration. The ability to put up with each other, all right? Tolerating each other. That is the glue that holds every relationship on this earth together. Every relationship you've ever had or will have is held together by the ability to tolerate each other. Right? Now, the problem is toleration is sort of a dirty word, right? We don't go around and advertise our relationships as, well, I'm tolerating him or I'm tolerating her. You know, when Tim comes up here and announces the anniversaries, he's not like, congratulations to whoever you've put up with each other after 48 years. Good job putting up with each other. Right? When we describe our relationships, when we advertise it or market, and again, any relationship you have, even with your kids or your parents or your spouse or your neighbors, it's always wonderful, don't we? It's like, oh, it's just the best relationship you've ever had. They're so loving, and it's kittens and rainbows every day of the week, right? It's wonderful. And just like I told Michael, you guys remember Dr. Phil before Oprah, right? And the tagline in his whole series was Get Real. Let's get real about relationships. They're tough, all right? And they're not always kittens and rainbows. Okay? And guess what? Most relationships, in order to make it work, is going to require some putting up with each other. Some toleration, that big T word. They're going to require that glue to hold it together. Because here's a fact. You put 2 humans in the same room, all right? I don't care how much they like each other. At some point, they're going to fight, okay? They're going to be in conflict with each other. If nothing else, they'll be in conflict over the room temperature. All right, and unless they can tolerate each other and put up with each other, right, they're going to leave the room. That's just the way it works. Okay, so without toleration, no relationship holds together. It's the glue for every relationship in your life. All right, at work, I have 3 shifts, all right? First shift, second shift, third shift, all right? And any of you who have ever managed shifts, shift workers, or any of you who have ever been a shift worker, you know the shifts never get along with each other. Like first shift hates second shift, and second shift hates third shift, right, and vice versa. And every morning I come to work, I got a line of people stretching out the door just waiting to tell me about all the things that other shift did not do. Oh, they left me this mess. Oh, I got to clean up after this girl. Oh, they're making me do more work here. And they always have little petitions about how I should fire this person and give them a raise. All right, that is every morning. Okay, just a stack, a pile of papers of handwritten notes, okay? And I take these people in and I address them and I try and address their concerns. And I listen to their petitions, okay? And I say, listen, this thing's a team, all right? A team requires that we all work together, all right? That's the only way this operation is going to work, all right? And as a team, you are required to love your teammate, okay? And I use that exact word, guys. Actually use the word love. Now, when I say that word love to a very irate employee, they launch themselves bodily out of the chair. They're like, love them? I hate them. How can you love someone, right, and not like them? They're like, they do this to me, and I want to strangle them, right? And I'm like, sit down and just listen for a change. I was like, I do this little example. I say, do you got a pet? And of course, these people work at a farm, so they all love animals, okay? Oh, yes, I got a pet. They got a gerbil and a cat and a dog and a goldfish, right? And I'm like, does your dog sometimes do things that you don't like? Like, does it run away, chew on things, wet on the floor? They're like, yeah, it does that all the time. I'm like, oh, that's a problem, all right? And then I'm like, okay, so when it does the bad thing, I say, do you get angry at it? They're like, yes, I don't like it. I'm like, exactly. So because you don't like it, does that mean you drag the dog out back in the backyard and shoot it? They're like, oh, no, I would never do that to Fluffy, right? And I'm like, you just made my point, right? You love it. You just don't like the behavior, right? So you see how we're getting past this sort of 8th grade mentality on love, right? You don't have to like the behavior. You don't have to like what they're doing. But what you have to do is you have to tolerate it. You got to put up with it. You have to see past it. That is what love is, putting up with it, all right? Guys, Jesus Christ, the ultimate embodiment of toleration. What do you think the cross is all about? The crucifixion. Right? He so loves us, he's willing to die and suffer on the cross. I don't think he liked it. I don't think he was up there saying, hey, throw in a few more nails, make this a little bit more painful. It was painful enough, right? I don't think he liked the fact that we were persecuting him and chucking stones at him and saying, hey, crucify that guy, the people he's trying to save and help. I don't think he liked that. Right? And I don't even think today when we sin and go against what he wants us to do, I don't think he likes that either. But guess what? He's willing to tolerate it. He's willing to put up with it. He's the ultimate embodiment of toleration because he so loved you. He looks past it, right? It all comes down to toleration. Jesus Christ teaches you to tolerate. And that's what he's saying here in this gospel. He said, just like I loved you, just like I had to put up with it, I'm asking you to do the same with each other and tolerate each other and love one another. You know, in this world, there's this new thing where sometimes we like to say, well, I just love my family, but there's some people in my life I really don't like, so I don't love them, right? Or there's this person who's really hurt me, and I don't really like them, I don't love them, right? Jesus is very clear here, everyone. That doesn't mean I just love all these people but 10, or all these people but 1. That's everyone. That's what he's commanding to do. Okay, every relationship you have requires love. All right, now this gets really difficult, doesn't it? What if there's people out there that do some really bad things? Right? People who've really hurt you. How do you love a serial killer? Right? How do you love someone who's sexually molested children? Now that gets tough, doesn't it? Right? See, love also requires tolerance. It requires respect. All right? And this is where you got to be really nuanced with this tool, this thing we call love. You got to look at that person, look and say, hey, I don't like you. I don't like the behaviors you did. I don't respect the behaviors you've performed in this life. And personally, I think that you should be brought to justice for that stuff. But you still have to look at them and say, hey, I still respect you as a human. You still have inherent worth and value. You were created by God for whatever reason. And I have to respect that. I have to tolerate that. I have to love you. I don't like you. I don't like the behaviors. I don't respect it. Right? But I love you. That's where it gets tough, doesn't it? And you know, there's relationships. There's this new thing in the 21st century where we define some relationships as toxic. I'm sure you guys have heard this. Psychiatrists and psychologists push this concept. They say, well, there's toxic people in your life. And these people are so toxic, right? They've hurt you, or they said bad things to you, right? Or that you just can't deal with it, right? They bring out the worst in you. So the idea with these toxic relationships is you treat them like a toxic cesspool. You fence them off, and you put a wall around them, and you just essentially act like they never existed. You see them on the street corner, you don't even acknowledge them. They're toxic. Okay, that's actually pushed by medical professionals right now. That's the tolerant and loving way to deal with those people. Guys, can you see how that is not very tolerant and not very loving at all? All right, because when we essentially ignore someone, right, and say, well, I'm just not going to deal with them because they've hurt me, we're essentially saying, hey, you have no worth as a human. I'm acting like you never existed. Right? That's not being respectful at all. And guess what? That's tough. That's tough to look that person who's really hurt you in life and say, I still respect you as a human being, as a creation of God. I don't like you. I don't like what you've done, but I still respect you. I still love you. That's where it gets tough. We live in this world where we say, well, confrontation is bad. Oh, I can't get in fights with anybody. Right? I can't go up to somebody and argue with them. Right? Stay away. Right? We're all passive aggressive these days. Guys, confrontation is respect. Going up to somebody and say, hey, I disagree with you. I don't like that, right? That's saying, hey, I still acknowledge your presence. I still am willing to come up with you and disagree with you. See how that's tolerance? See how that's love? See how that's breaking free of this 8th grade mentality, this Romeo and Juliet, this Hallmark movie style of love that we've all been sort of trained to think about it with, all right? I want to tell you a little Chinese wisdom story here to sort of kind of wrap this thing up. Okay, it's sort of like the stories you find in the fortune cookies. I love Chinese, so you always get the fortune cookie at the end and get the cute little saying. All right, but here, this little ancient Chinese wisdom story. It goes like this. If you really like someone in your life and you think you're going to want to keep them with you forever, the first thing you need to do is, for 1 year, learn everything you can about that person for 1 year. And if at the end of first year you've done it right, you will have found out everything that person cannot do, everything that person will not do, and everything that person says they'll do and never do, okay? And at that point, if you did it right, you'll realize you really don't like that person anymore. In fact, you just want to get rid of them and move on to something else, okay? So you'll grab them and you'll chuck them out the door and throw them onto the street. Okay, and as you're getting ready to slam the door in their face, you'll look out and you'll look at them and they'll look back at you. And in that moment, you'll realize, I really don't like them anymore. But now after 1 year of learning about all their faults, now I love them. And in that moment, you'll invite them back into your home. You'll close the door, you'll embrace them, and you'll keep them with you forever. That's true love. The ability to see past our faults, the things we cannot do, the things we will not do, the things we say we will do and never do. That's the love that Jesus Christ asks us to give and offer to everybody, everyone, every single person on this planet. That's what the commandment he gives to you today in this gospel reading. That's the love that Susan and Steve Thomas have, right? When she said, I hate him more after 41 years, but I will never love him any less. That's what she's talking about. Okay? The ability to tolerate, the ability to put up, the ability to see past things and still love. Right? This year, Steve and Susan Thomas are celebrating their 48th wedding anniversary. 48 years. Okay? And if you ask Susan and say, how'd you make it for 48 years? She'll say, I had to put up with Steve for 48 years. Okay? But there's another side of the story, right? If you go to Steve and say, how did you make it for 48 years? He'll say, well, I had a wonderful, loving wife named Susan who put up with me for 48 years. But then he'll pull out his pack of cigarettes. He always lights a cigarette when he's about to say something profound. And he'll take a draw on that cigarette and he'll say, but remember, love's a two-way street. Did we make it 48 years because Susan put up with me? Or did we make it 48 years because I put up with Susan? Amen.